So this story is about my worst boyfriend ever, and as you will hear, he set the bar pretty high, so there's been room in my life for a few other bad boyfriends in addition to him, though he is, to the best of my knowledge, the worst. He may or may not have been a count. I still don't know for sure, and likely never will. He's not the only guy I've dated who left me wondering, after 3 months, 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, however long we were together, whether a really big piece of information core to his very identity was true or not. For instance, a guy not longer after him claimed he had been a model. His portfolio was in an unpacked box somewhere, sure he'd show it to me, just give him a couple of days first to find it. And on and on and on. Likewise was Renaud, the guy I'll tell you about today, really junior royalty. Was he really estranged from his dad, who was a count in Luxembourg, and thus reduced to living a modest life with his single mom and his affected sister in a modest apartment in Lyon, France. In my darkest moments, near or at the end of a poisonous relationship, when I'd been reduced to stewing and Googling in a fit of rage and regret and deep embarrassment, the internet has not been forthcoming with a definitive answer, perhaps because it's hard to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that something is not true. And I've been reluctant afterwards, when the relationship is finally behind me, to return to the internet for another go. There's obviously a slippery slope with big lies like this. If he wasn't really a count, maybe all of our shared, deeply felt emotional experiences, and no, there were not that many, were also lies. Maybe everything was a lie, so I'd rather just not know. I met Renaud, or Arnaud. Sometimes he went by one name, sometimes the other, I do not know why, when I was in Lyon, France, for my junior year abroad as an undergraduate at UC Berkeley. I was majoring in French literature, and also English. I was a double major. I was a somewhat lost gay kid, 20 years old at the time. I went abroad. If I were sure that I had since flowered, I'd say that I was a late bloomer. I put a lot of pressure on my year abroad, as no doubt every kid fortunate enough to study abroad does. I was going to go to France and radically change my life and identity. And I was going to have a lot of sex, moving in every respect from American amateur to European sophisticate. In Lyon, which I hadn't heard of before it appeared as an option on the study abroad application, but was sure was going to be just like Paris, it wasn't, and it's not, I was going to enter into a linguistically and sexually immersive experience and come out transformed. The year leading up to my going abroad had been my awkward rave and drug years. I hung out in dingy apartments with other UC Berkeley outcasts, eating homemade Hot Pockets, someone had a sandwich maker, and experimenting with drugs, ecstasy, acid, shrooms, and pot. Nothing harder like the stuff they do in New York and LA. I wore a lot of synthetic fabric thrift store clothes and went to underground warehouse parties. In between dancing frantically in the main room, I would make lifelong friends with other kids in the chill-out spaces, and then wonder dazedly over an Egg McMuffin a few hours later as I started to come down in the harsh light of dawn, if those friendships would really last. In other words, looking back, it seems unlikely that I could morph from that into a European sophisticate within 1 year, but that was the expectation I put on myself. I met Renaud very early on. I think it was during my first month in Lyon. I met him at the main Oons Club, if you catch the reference, on the town's one half a gay street, the Rue Sainte-Catherine. And note that I don't actually speak French that well. That's actually an important detail for understanding how some of the things that happened to me there were able to happen to me there. I'm a little sketchy on the details, but I'm pretty sure that we first got together because of one of those desperate, the club is closing and I still haven't undergone a sexual transformation into a European sophisticate type of things. I locked eyes with a man who was a weird Gallic Pee Wee Herman lookalike, tall, skinny, sporting, often, I would soon find out, an ill-fitting suit, and somewhat goofy looking in the face in a way that, looking back, might have been due to generations of inbreeding, could be, I'll never know. At first, it didn't need to go beyond one mediocre night of bad young people sex, but I was desperate to form a real sustaining bond with another boy, Dan Savage style. So in the awkward moment after, in the master bedroom of the bourgeois apartment I was sharing during my year in Lyon, with an American girl, Claire, and 2 non-suspecting non-Americans we had roped in, a French girl, Nathalie, and a Bulgarian guy, Lubo, I must have said the awkward things that a dumb, desperate kid says to overly romanticize bad sex with a person with whom one has nothing in common. And yet, even despite all that, it didn't work out at first for either of us. Renaud and I were only dating for about a week or 2, and then it fizzled. It was my roommate Claire who got us back together. She saw how lonely and sad I was in the following weeks, not because I missed Renaud, but because I was living abroad and having culture shock and homesickness, and was no doubt anxious that the clock was ticking down on my time there and I hadn't metamorphosed yet. Claire told me that she had arranged something to cheer me up. A person was going to come visit me one night, and you have to promise not to be mad. I went wishfully in my head through all the cute boys I had met since arriving in Lyon, wondering which one it could be. The night came, and guess who was at the door? Okay, it's going to get darker, so be ready. The red flag that I didn't notice at this early stage was that Renaud, despite our not knowing each other in any way long enough to really invest in each other, had nevertheless made friends with my roommate and was pouring his heart out to her behind my back. I was soon to find out that he had also befriended many of the other Americans abroad in our group from the UCs. All of the little lost and pretentious fags and fag hags, who are two major constituencies among American kids who choose France as their study abroad destination. Who knew? This is stunning. One would be hard-pressed to find a group in France more desperate and less discriminating about making French friends than a bunch of stupid Americans abroad, and Renaud exploited that. So he kept in touch with Claire, and she heard from him how sad he was from Claire, and she heard from him how sad he was about our breakup, and he in turn heard through her how sad I was, apparently about the same thing. By a combination of my lack of self-esteem, my desperateness to have something happen while I was abroad, and his ability to wear a person down by refusing to take no for an answer, we got back together. And that was really the beginning of the end, because from that point on, Renaud would not take me at my word when I tried to break up with him. Again, I was inconsistent. I didn't really know what I wanted. He, on the other hand, a European sophisticate, did. And he was truly in love with me. He hadn't known that before, but now, having almost lost me once, he was sure. It's been more than 10 years since I really sat down and thought about that year in Lyon and what happened with Renaud. In a corner of my bedroom, hidden in plain sight, is a box of my old journals from my undergrad years. They aren't diaries. I've never succeeded in keeping a diary because nothing ever happens to me on an ordinary day. And I've never wanted to have to acknowledge that fact night after night. Instead, they are a collection of scraps of poems and short stories I wrote during those years because, like every other lit major, I wanted to be a creative writer. I've always remembered that somewhere among them is a terse, bullet-pointy account of what happened with Renaud that year, written in case I needed to explain to authorities of some sort or another exactly how things escalated in the way they did. And written also, I imagine, I wouldn't put it past myself, in case of my death. As I worked on this story for tonight, I put off digging that account out because I wanted first to see what my memory would flash up on its own, if I just let it return to that year unaided. I have a very, very bad memory, extending even, I think, to a mild case of the now fashionable face blindness. But it's always also been a richly selective memory, zoning in and cherishing odd small moments and people's strange foibles, even as it often lets slip away any sense of the big picture. So I wanted first to see what I could remember on my own. I remember Renaud coming to see me once in an apartment and refusing to leave. So instead I left, forcing him to follow me, because it seemed like the only way to get rid of him, and also because it allowed me to isolate the problem with myself rather than keep bringing my roommates into the drama. At this point, I was practicing with Renaud a form of non-confrontational and I hope de-escalating passive resistance. We had gotten outside and turned the street corner when he pulled me to the ground, pinned me there, and started hitting me in the face. I remember that he told me at this point, crying, that what bothered him most about the whole situation is that it was clearly so contemptuous of him. I had been handling him like a spoiled child who couldn't take no for an answer. I just lay there, said nothing, and took the abuse because, as I said, I was trying to de-escalate things, and writing it out seemed like the best possible option. But also because I felt that he was to some extent right. I thought he was acting stupidly and desperately, and that I was smarter and more in control, less desperate than he was. I felt sorry for him, at the same time that I really, really wanted him to go away. Looking back today, I realize, A, that I don't narrate who I was at that time as particularly smart, in control, or non-desperate, and B, that blaming oneself is a textbook dynamic for people who are victimized in an abusive relationship. My roommate Claire, I remember, tried to explain that to me at the time. But anyway, I remember that I was lying there after Renaud had stopped hitting me, but while he was still holding me pinned to the ground, and a young woman, maybe in her late 20s, who was passing by, stopped, looked down at me from behind and over his shoulder, and asked me if everything was all right. I said, oui, ça va, merci, or something like that. She seemed very skeptical, but she let us be. I don't remember how this particular occasion ended, but it did. Renaud went away and I went home. Everything else, though, remains pretty vivid. I also remember later on, Renaud luring me to his apartment and then locking me in, the door locked by a key from the inside, and proceeding to tell me that he had taken a bunch of pills, he wouldn't say how many, and that he may or may not drift off into sleep and die in front of me. I remember calling through the door until his neighbor heard and agreed to call the authorities. Eventually, the police came, and a fireman, I think, broke down the door. Renaud really was taken to a hospital and stayed overnight. I know that much, but again, I have no clue as to the veracity of the claim about an overdose of pills. And I remember other things too, like when he stole my family's contact information and called my mom back in California to tell her something sinister. She later told me he called, but she still won't tell me what he said. I hadn't come out to her yet. But looking through the journal, I realized that there were a lot of other things that I'd forgotten. For instance, just how insistent and manipulative Renaud was, that he would not drop a topic until you had given in. The way he wore you down with long, long conversations and debates until you said, fine, I'll see you one more time if you insist that you need that for closure, but then we really are broken up, okay? And I think I could do that better now, but that wore me down, statements like that. I also forgot that he would just bring over, unasked, things he had that I could use in my apartment, since I had arrived for the year in France with only 2 big suitcases and was missing so many creature comforts. Then, of course, whenever I'd try to give these things back to make a clean break from him, he would refuse to take them back, so that the connection always remained between us. There was one key climactic day in my time with Renaud when he burst into the apartment and became so violent that it took me, 2 of my roommates, and 2 friends together to restrain him. I, of course, had remembered this day, but looking through the journal, I realized that I'd only half remembered it. So I want to read you a bit from the journal that I looked through this week. So this is from my account. And this is from the middle of the account of February 4th, 1998. Claire is my roommate, Louise's friend, and I are sprayed with mace. Renaud chases me into the hall with the mace. He has me on the ground. I call Liebegott, another roommate, to come help me. He comes and takes the mace away. Renaud is strangling me, but we are separated. Things calm for a second, but then Renaud lifts a marble vase from the mantel and menaces me with it. Little Frenchism there, menaces me with it. Louise and Claire get it out of his hands. He chases me into the bathroom where he pushes me into the tub, and then after I get out, embraces me, and then headbutts me. Louise, Claire, Liebegott, and Liebegot's friend contain him while I call the police. They eventually get him outside the door of the apartment, but he doesn't leave. Police come. I make a deposition. Renaud tries to make a counter-deposition on the grounds of, quote, moral prejudice, but police refuse. Knowing that Renaud is detained for some time, Claire and I make plans to go on vacation early. So our spring break's coming up, and we'll skip class, we're just leaving town. We go to the bank and the train station. When we return to the apartment, we learn that Renaud has been there with the police. He told the police that I had drugs in my duffel bag. On the grounds of recuperating Renaud's affairs, the police searched Claire's and my rooms. The vitamins in my bag are taken. I go to the police station and explain, but they insist on doing an analysis. They ask me why my friend would accuse me of having drugs if it weren't true. I explain that my friend tried to kill me, but they seem nonplussed. And that's an incorrect use of the word nonplussed, but I meant unimpressed, I guess. Next day, Thursday, February 5th. My landlady receives a call from someone claiming to be the police, saying that there was a violent dispute at the apartment and that drug trafficking is taking place. She calls my roommate, and these vitamins, by the way, are little packs of Costco vitamins that I take in multivitamin packs, but they're hard drugs now. Drug trafficking is taking place. She calls my roommate, who explains. Christine Stapp, the director of my study abroad program, calls the police and learns that the drug analysis revealed that they were indeed vitamins, and that the police never called my landlady. So in summary, put in summary here, he assaulted me, little bullet point summary, in case the authorities gave me only 30 seconds. He assaulted me and others, premeditated with mace, hit me with his head, strangled me, impersonated a police officer on the phone, tried to bring me up on false drug charges, tried to get me evicted, and to get me deported. And I'd forgotten some of that. So, in the end, I don't want to make light of what happened between Renaud and me. The experience left me with a palpable feeling of dread that took a long, long time to shake off. I remember I became a bit of a recluse during my last 6 months in Lyon. I did not go out at night in the city for fear of seeing him, and I had trouble trusting my friends for fear that he had also become their friend without me knowing. I also remember that I was anxious the few times I returned to France over the next 5 years, even though it was always to places other than Lyon, for fear that I would see him on the street or he'd somehow find me. I've actually never returned to Lyon, though I can't just blame Renaud for that. It was a really terrible city. It may have changed, I'll give it a possibility, but it was a horrible city. But despite all of this, I look back on that period today with a lot of distance and humor, seeing it now as a history of kids acting stupidly. I'm just really, really glad that nobody got hurt, mortally wounded, or imprisoned, including Renaud, though I have no clue what became of him after that year.